Welcome back to our final, A Faith That Will Not Fail, as we walk through the book, Michelle Couchat's book. And we invite you, if you haven't, this is your first day with us, go back and watch some of these. These are really meaningful moments and a really meaningful book about how to grow in our faith even during the hard times. We're closing this on Holy Saturday. This is a special edition of this, and we're closing with the last day of her section on waiting. The section title is Living in the In-Between, which is such a perfect encapsulation of what Holy Saturday is all about. It's this weird space in the church tridium of Good Friday, Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday, where we're really just waiting. We're waiting silent moments with as we kind of mourn the loss of Jesus in our space.
I think Couchat says it well. At the middle part of this chapter, we began this series of 10 practices with the practice of lament. And I find it fitting that the practice of waiting brings the 10 to a close. Lament is not our final prayer. It's a prayer in the meantime. It's what we utter in both words and silence when we sit in the Saturday in between. It's the sometimes wordless, often tearful prayer of waiting, sitting neck deep in our struggles while waiting and believing in a future redemption. Yeah. So we've got the struggle of yesterday for the redemption of tomorrow.
And waiting sucks. It just does.
We're not going to sugarcoat it.
I hate waiting. I'm not good at it. My kids will tell you I hate being at Lions because I don't like waiting. I am not. It's not something that I find joy in. And yet, something happens in us in the in-between of waiting.
Yeah, and we get to experience Easter Sunday tomorrow, right? And it's this true waiting, right? I love Oswald Chambers. One of the greatest strains in life is the strain of waiting for God. And when we don't know how the story ends, is where we really get into the midst of this struggle of waiting, right? Where we're still waiting for, was the treatment successful? Was, is there money in the bank? when am I getting paid next? Are my kids, getting into the college that they tried to get into? That's such a hard place, right? Being in the in-between. And we read these Bible stories over and over again, and we always know the end, right? We know that the good ending, the Disney ending, if you would, is coming to a lot of these stories. And so in our own stories, how do we patiently wait on a God where we don't know the response? We hope for the best, but what do we do when we don't know what's next?
And I think this is, I talked a few weeks ago about another book I'm reading about discipleship right now, and the argument the author is making is that there are 6 stages of being discipled, and that most people only make it through the first 3, because one of the stages you hit a wall, and that wall is often the waiting. Yep. And people, we've all had this experience in our own lives, but we've seen it 1,000 times in people that we serve, that when the wall comes, they walk away because the waiting just feels endless.
And it feels like never. It feels like a no and it's never instead of a wait.
Yeah. And I think, as you've talked about a few times, the consumeristic model of America is, well, just buy your way out of it, right? Like if you're in the middle of the wait and you don't like it, shop on Amazon. If fill the space. And the difficult practice, right? This practice, I encourage you to read through each of these days in waiting after, because we didn't focus on them during this season. Yeah. But this waiting space is where we form a faith that will not fail. It's what do we do with these moments? You look at some of the wisest people around you who are saints in living saint form for us. And the thing that I will promise you see consistent through each of them is they've figured out how to wait.
Yeah, they haven't necessarily gotten an easy answer. They just kept.
Yeah, kept going, kept reaching out to other people, kept connecting, kept reframing their perspective.
Kept lamenting,
kept doing all the things that we've talked about in this space, but kept
going,
keeping on.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just reminded of one of the wineries. I forget the name of it. We went to wine taste
Faust.
at. Maybe it was that one, but I forget which one. But it was the one that talked about how they planted their vines in clay on purpose because they knew that the struggle of those vines trying to grow through the clay produced a better grape, which produced a richer wine, and how that's all of our stories, right? It's the suffering that really produces this richness in us, and I hate that, right?
Yeah. We don't want to push through the soil.
It's like we don't sell that on bumper stickers or on Sundays.
I push through.
But we want to hear prosperity gospel, but man, it's the suffering that really changes and makes us who we are. And maybe you guys will be different in this, but if I look back on some of the struggles I've been through in my life, and I remember somebody asked me a question one time, would you change them? And I said to them, no, because they've made me who I am. They've helped me appreciate and learn about God and how he interacts with my life.
Absolutely.
There's some I would change, but that's So for our 5-minute faith builder, let me ask you again, what are you waiting for? Every day we live in Saturday, in between while we wait to go to our true home. Yeah. Can you trust that he's coming for you? And that when he does, or she does, all the lingering unknowns will be resolved once and for all? Take a moment, write down what you're waiting for. Don't be afraid to give voice to some of those longings and deep in your heart. If you, in the early days when we ask you to write down what you're longing for, this time be a little bit more vulnerable and open and honest about that. And then pray the words of Psalm 31, 14 and 15 aloud, placing all of these longings, all of these things we're waiting for, in the hands of a God who loves you. We have been honored to be with you during this season.
Thank you for your time.
And thank you for the 5 minutes you give us every day. Go in peace and serve our Lord. And
thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.